I'd like to call the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors for December 11th, 2018 meeting back to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
Sure. Supervisor Cerna?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
And you have a quorum. So for your first item, we had held over item 14, approve a resolution for salary plan for unrepresented non-management and management employees.
Good afternoon, board members. David Devine, Director of Personnel Services. In front of you today is a resolution to approve the salary plan for unrepresented employees, and this covers over 400 employees ranging from clerical to executive management. Since it covers executive management, state legislation requires that we have a public hearing and take any comments. If there's after any comments, we just ask that you approve the attached resolution.
Okay. We need a public hearing, is that what you said?
Just open up if there's
Open
any
the public
comments.
hearing. I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Close the public hearing. Any supervisors have any comments on this item?
Move to approve?
Second, please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Thanks,
Thank you.
David.
And for your afternoon items, item 62, workshop on the 2018 Sacramento County Transportation Development Fee Update.
Do you have a PowerPoint?
And I should have a PowerPoint. Well, good afternoon. I'm Dan Schuman with the Department of Transportation. The department has been developing an update to the Sacramento County Transportation Development Fee, also known as the SCTDF. This effort has been underway for a little over a year and a half, starting back in March of 2017, when the county entered into a contract with DKS Associates to assist the department with a comprehensive update. This includes updates to future growth projections, the traffic modeling to analyze the impacts of new growth and determine the transportation improvements to mitigate that growth, and to prepare the nexus analysis that forms the basis for the SCTDF, its improvements, its costs, and the resulting fee structure. So today we're presenting a workshop to provide your board with an overview of the 2018 SCTDF update process, the findings of the Nexus study, as well as the proposed fee structure. Today's workshop also provides the opportunity for stakeholders and the public to provide input on the updates. We expect to return to your board in about 2 months to request approval of the SCTD update, as well as the adoption of the associated ordinances. I'll start with a little bit of background on the SCTDF. The purpose of the fee is to fund the delivery and construction of roadway, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit improvements that are needed to accommodate additional traffic and transit ridership generated by new development in the unincorporated area. Roadway and transit development fees were first adopted in 1988 following the approval of the original Measure A sales tax, and the assessment of a traffic impact fee continues to be a condition for continuing to receive Measure A revenues. In 2008, the board adopted a major update to the development fee program, which established the SCTDF structure that is now in effect. And then there was a subsequent update of some portions of the SCTDF done in 2010. State law requires that development fee programs be reviewed at least every 5 years and then be updated if there are significant changes to the assumptions on which the current fees are based. So the need for this current update for 2018 is based on the adoption of the general plan update in 2011, the approval and development of some major specific plan areas in the unincorporated area, as well as significant increases in construction costs that have occurred since the last update. The development forecasts on which the SCTDF base have been updated. The current fee is based on a horizon year of 2032, which is what the travel demand forecasts within the current fee are established. The 2018 update uses a base year of 2017 and a 30 to 35 year horizon for travel demand forecast, resulting in a new horizon year for this update of 2050, or approximately 2050. So this 30-year time frame is fairly typical of traffic impact fee programs. Based on the analysis, the growth analysis we've done, housing units in unincorporated Sacramento County are expected to grow by about 56% by the year 2050, along with a corresponding growth in employment. And then the growth projections for this SCTD update also assume full build out of all of the specific plan areas in the unincorporated county. And this includes the 4 projects in the Jackson Highway corridor that are currently progressing towards their approval process, as well as the proposed North Precinct area up in the Natomas area that has recently begun its application process. So it's a very comprehensive traffic analysis that includes really all known projected growth in the county. The SCTDF is organized into 6 geographical fee districts, each that has its own fee schedule, and each district's cost responsibility for the transportation improvements in the SCTF, and therefore its fee schedule, is based on the number of new trips traveling to and from that particular district, as estimated by the SACOG regional travel demand model. And this 2018 fee update actually maintains the same 6 fee districts as the current SCTDF does. The types of transportation improvements funded by the SCTDF update are generally the same as in the existing fee program. The majority of the costs funded by the SCTDF are for road and intersection capacity improvements. So, and there are about 171 miles of new widening or extended roadways that are expected to be needed to meet the travel demand in the 2050 timeframe. The SCTDF funds capacity improvements on 4-lane and 4-lane arterial streets, 6-lane thoroughfare roads only. We do not include 2-lane roadways in the fee program, but the maximum number of lanes of any roadway segment will not exceed the number of lanes allowed by the general plan. Included in the roadway capacity improvements are segments that are part of the Capital Southeast Connector project. And the connector is a expressway facility that uses a unique set of design guidelines that actually exceed county standards for our normal arterial and thoroughfare roadways. So this includes some enhanced facilities such as grade separated intersections. So for the purpose of estimating this project and establishing fees within the SCTDF, the SCTDF assumes the segments of the connector that are part of the program are built as a standard county roadway with some enhanced capacity intersections. So we did not estimate this on the ultimate connector configuration, as we felt that the enhanced facilities such as grade separated intersections, we would anticipate that those would be funded regionally, either by regional funds or even potentially a regional fee. Other facilities included in the SCTDF, rural roadway safety improvements, and these include adding shoulders on roadways that currently or will operate at with more than 2,000 vehicles a day. Also included in that would be intersection upgrades and such, and other safety improvements. And there's about 85 miles of rural roadways that are included in the SCTDF. Also, in walkways and bikeways are part of the SCTDF improvements. The roadway capacity improvements already include full bike lanes, curb gutter, sidewalk, but there is also additional funding to cover trail or regional trail facilities, and these are regional trails that would connect on-street facilities as well as local trails within specific plan areas. Also, some improvements to routes that might be parallel to a congested corridor are funded within the SCTDF. Also included are improvements for intelligent transportation system improvements, ITS improvements, that would improve the efficiency and operation of roadways, particularly those that are expected to experience unacceptable operating conditions, level of service F or worse in the future. And these include intersection control and surveillance, expansion of the county's traffic operations center, communication system, and real-time incident management. Also represented in the SCTDF are transit improvements, because new development will increase the demand for regional transit services. So the SCTDF does include equipment and facilities to meet this demand. And I will get back to transit here in just a minute to talk about how it's addressed in this update. And then finally, the SCTDF update has identified about 78 miles of roadways that will continue to experience unacceptable operating conditions, level of service F or worse, even after their full build out per the general plan in year 2050. So because additional widening for capacity is no longer possible on these roadways, the SCTDF includes improvements that will help to reduce travel demand and improve mobility within these particular corridors. So this includes high capacity bus services, ITS improvements, intersection improvements, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and other complete street facilities. This is a map that's part of the Nexus study, which is actually attachment 1 to your agenda package. This is just an example of one of the maps within the Nexus study that depicts the improvements, and this is really showing the roadway capacity improvements that are included for funding in the SCTDF. Now getting to the transit component of the SCTDF, as I previously noted, the SCTDF update includes equipment and facilities to accommodate the increased demand for transit services that would be provided by regional transit. Transit improvements would include new buses, maintenance facilities, light rail system improvements, and other facilities needed to accommodate the increased demand, as well as specific roadway improvements, and these would be like queue jumps or traffic signal or ITS management type systems that would support a higher level of bus service. In the proposed update, what we're calling the transit impact fee, or the TIF, would be accounted for separately from the roadway portions of the SCTDF, and revenues collected from the SCTDF for transit purposes would then be transferred over to regional transit, who would then manage the fees and expend them on eligible improvements that are defined in the Nexus study. So the establishment of the transit impact fee, along with the SCTDF update, is going to require that the Nexus study and the transit impact fee be approved and adopted by the Regional Transit Board of Directors. In addition, a MOU between the county and RT will need to be developed to address the collection, transfer, and administration of these fees. So we plan to go before the RT board prior to coming back to you in February. So in the January timeframe, we'll be going to the RT board to present the transit impact fee and seek their approval of the fee, as well as adopt an MOU with the county. So now getting to the proposed fee schedule in the SCTDF update. Within your agenda package, there are 6 exhibits that talk about the new fees as well as comparison to the existing fees. So I'm only going to show you a couple of these exhibits in this presentation, but I do have the ability to look at the other tables if you would like to see those. This first one is a copy of Exhibit 1 in your agenda package, and this provides a summary of the SCTDF improvements and the costs of those improvements that would be funded by the SCTDF, and also how these costs are allocated to the 6 fee districts, and in order to establish the fees for those districts. And this table depicts the proposed fees in the form of dwelling unit equivalents. We do have the other tables 2 through 5, or exhibits 2 through 5, show the fees in terms of land use. So those would be the fees that when a developer comes in to pull a building permit for a specific type of use, whether it be residential or commercial or office, they would pay the fee that's depicted on those other exhibits. In this one, we've broken up the fees in terms of the roadway portion of the SCTDF and the transit impact fee, and those are what are highlighted in yellow on the table. So we have the total amount just for the roadway portion of the SCTDF, the total amount for the transit impact fee, and then the combined total, all in terms of dwelling unit equivalent.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, I was waiting for him to finish
okay.
this page. Are you finished with that page?
Yes.
A couple questions, Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, thank you. Dan, and when you get to the next slide, it'll touch more on it, but I guess question I have after I briefed with you yesterday and then had a chance to go through this more thoroughly over the evening last night, that in the District 5 of the Trans Fee District, which is largely rural, and in fact, in the last update, we didn't even have a fee triggered, and then we did. Now all these are at roughly 100% increase over what they were before. And I get it that we're looking downstream at some of the rural roadways for traffic impacts as folks are trying to find their ways in and around the county. But so now we're going to, we're doubling it, and yet I guess part of the problem I have, and we're going to have a workshop in January, is that the infrastructure out there right now, besides might be inadequate, if it were only area residents, because if I look at the blue on your map previously, which takes in all the rural portions of the county, ag-res, if not agricultural, and if I totaled up the number of residents and probably number of trips generated there, I would be, besides maybe a few of the roads, I would be willing to bet that there's very few of those where the local traffic only generates 2,000 cars a day. All the pass-through traffic that's coming through on a lot of these roads, and yet we're now going to ask the homeowner in Harold or down in the Delta or somewhere out in Slough House or Point Pleasant, wherever it might be, to pay $14,000 for a building permit just on the transportation portion of it, which basically doubles what it was previously. And I guess beyond, at some point in time, way off in the future, you're going to get a bike lane or a pedestrian lane. What is it that we're going to get in the rural roads when the system is crumbling already? And we're going to talk about that in another context, that we're going to get $14,000 a house just for transportation development fee when it doubles. So if you can just spend a moment as to how we got to that number, because now you have this roadway capacity, and when you have densities that are 1 house to 5 acres, or 1 house to 10 acres, or 1 house to 2 acres, and we talk about developers coming in and getting permits, in large part, those are not developments. Those are, single-family homes, and we don't see, hundreds of them being built even over a decade. I guess I'm curious as to how that fee rivals the other 4 districts, which are either, largely urban or suburban. There's segments that may have a little more ag-res to them, but that's a big, big jump. And when we briefed yesterday, that didn't occur to me till I had a chance to read through this a little more thoroughly. So I guess I need to have some explanation as to how we got there, at least with this workshop recommendation.
I may have to call upon John Long to talk in more detail about how the analysis, at least for the sake of the roadway capacity improvements, how it treated District 5, because their fair share is, of course, based on travel or the trips that are coming out of that particular district. So as a result, that's what established the cost per DUE for that particular type of improvement. Again, as you pointed out, the bulk, nearly half of the costs in the District 5 are for the rural roadways.
Right.
District 5 makes up about 60%, or is their share of the rural roadways is about 60% for the whole county. So that's probably contributed to one of the biggest jumps in this.
Right, the biggest jumps in that one, but so what was the baseline fee here? I didn't see a chart that showed me what I see District 5, it's not Supervisor District 5, although a large part that's in Supervisor District 5 is fee District 5. So, but I see your percentages, they're all, some are 185% of what they are currently, if I read your chart correctly.
For some of the
For the commercial
individual land
categories, which are
uses,
very, very modest. You may, I don't know how many gas stations have been built out in the 5th district, in District 5 in the last few years, a few. So the contributor factor there is now that you've stacked on top of roadway capacity, the rural roadways. It wasn't rural roadways before, and so that's where that's got in there. So why wasn't there some accounting for what they already were paying in that didn't?
maybe.
Want to invite John
I'll
up?
ask John.
Okay.
I'm John Long with DKS Associates. The rural roadways are in the current fee as well as the proposed fee program.
Current fee's $14,000 for rural road?
No, currently District 5, the average cost per single-family dwelling unit is about $7,400
okay.
per single-family dwelling unit. In the current fee, just like the proposed fee, it's primarily based upon the need for shoulders on rural roadways. 2,000 cars a day is what's recommended by the federal government, FHWA, to add shoulders to those. The issue is that most of those roadways already have 2,000 cars a day today. For the ones that we're putting on a map,
I get it.
almost
Yeah.
all of those have
A lot of
2,000
pass-through.
cars a day and are not. So the method used for this is we look at every one of those and we say, what is the projected growth in traffic on each of those? Because we're looking at what we can allocate to growth. And the average across all those roadways, about 24% of the future volume is the growth increment, the growth that would occur.
So you're taking the ag, so the ag res, so you build 8 houses a year in Harold, and you're collecting under this $120,000. That growth, so you maybe add whatever number of trips a single-family house generates, but the growth in the traffic, and I would, again, somebody have to persuade me otherwise, is not due to some rural home construction. It's due to pass-through traffic, people getting off the highways. It's due to people looking for other ways to get there, and that's commerce and that's movement of people, but it's not because somebody's building a house out in Harold.
it's a combination. It's a combination of the growth in some of these
But you're
rural areas,
allocating that to the growth,
with
though.
through traffic. And so what the nexus right now is based on is the growth in traffic as a percentage of the total future volume of traffic on each of these roadways. And the average of that is about 24%. So the cost of the roadway is, we take on average, we take about 24% of that. It varies road by road depending on the growth on those roadways. But if you look at the average, it's about 24%. And that's what the current fee is based upon. Now, why is there a big cost increase related to, from the current fee to the future? It's primarily that the unit cost, the cost per mile for a shoulder additions in the current fee was much lower than it should have been. There's a much more realistic cost of adding shoulders to rural roadways in the current fee compared to the earlier fee. The cost per mile was judged to be low, even not forgetting about inflation, just the cost per mile and the cross sections and so forth that are to be used. So that's predominantly why the costs have gone up so much, is because of the cost per mile for adding shoulders to those roadways. And then the allocation to new development was based upon this growth. Now, that doesn't mean that, as you can see, there is in Table 1, that some of the cost of rural roadways actually does get allocated to the urban area, because they do have some use of the roadways in rural areas as well, but it's predominantly from growth in rural areas that it's been allocated to.
Okay, but so we under, I guess, calculated the shoulders, but you know, for the mile roadway, and again, if I look at the urban development, you know, I guess it's good that there's some calculation, but it's pretty minuscule. Even if you took, you know, 10,000 times $20, you know, you can do the math. And when I don't know, as I ponder this, you know, the equity and all of that, because when you look at what's generated and you look at some growth increment, you know, we haven't zoned a lot of areas for new ag res. I mean, you're pretty static out there. You know, maybe in the future over 2050 you'll see, you know, a bit more. But you know, we've got all kinds of growth controls. If you take into account the general plan, you know, it's either going to be the city of Galt or it's going to be, you know, the city of Elk Grove pushing out, and you may have, you know, again, small parcel maps and so forth. But there's no, to my knowledge, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about the district, there's none of those areas are contemplating, you know, 100 unit developments of any sort on rural parcels. And so even trying to accumulate an amount of money, if you're going to use that as the projection at $14,000 a household, whatever your number is for the shoulders, you're going to be chasing that till this plan is, you know, expires. I don't see a way of getting there, and it seems that it puts a lot of onus on the rural homeowner or home builder, and you got this capacity now. You've doubled it with this rural roadways, and yet you're telling me that it was calculated, if I understood you correctly, that it was in the roadway capacity before. Is that what it was in? That number was built into that number? Yes. The shoulder was built in that. Now you've got this rural roadways on top of it, so you can include some of the urban growth. When you come back in February, we can have some more time to talk with you and staff about this, but that number really jumps off the page to me, because I go back to pre-2010, we didn't even trigger a fee out there. And then we talked about it, well, if you needed to modify an intersection, you might need to put a, you know, a right turn lane and so forth. And now we're talking about, you know, preponderance of funding for all these shoulders. And again, I would, you know, I think that the traffic generation, you know, whatever model we're using needs to be looked at, because again, for the modest growth that's occur out there, and to put that amount of onus on a homeowner in a rural area who may never live long enough to see the shoulders put in, I mean, just because it's going to take a long, you know, this plan contemplates that, but I don't see. Last question: what's the unit count that you're using for your model?
If you look at the bottom of Exhibit 1, there's the last row in there is growth in dwelling unit equivalents.
2,500
units?
2,500, and some of that is non-residential because it's dwelling unit equivalents, but the majority of that, it's over 2,000 dwelling units, and then the rest of it is some non-residential development within the greater District 5. So that's what's assumed in the travel demand model.
Okay, enough for now.
Okay. Mr. Cerna?
Thank you. So I guess my first question is based on something you mentioned about the shoulders. It sounds to me like this is a case of kind of making up for the sins of the past, so to speak. there wasn't enough allocation, there wasn't enough prediction that there was going to be this much need for shoulder mileage, and now the proposed fee would seek to make that up? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, the fee, they're including the fee because it's been determined that growth would have some share of the costs or some share of the need for the shoulder improvements. So in here, the SCTDF is only paying for about, 17%, I think, of the total cost for the shoulders?
Yes, the allocation, percent allocation to new development within the rural area is not that much different now than it was in the calculations that were done back in 2010. What I was trying to say was that the cost per mile of adding shoulders is significantly higher. It isn't just the issue of inflation, it's that what was done in the previous estimates was low compared to what it really cost.
So, so what I'm hearing is that a fairly standard nexus analysis was applied here. You looked at expected growth. You looked at household size. You looked at trip generation by DUE, and then you project that out, and you've got a numerator and denominator, and it spits out a fee. Correct?
Well,
more or less.
I'll be more specific. If the model is projecting, let's say that a road already has 3,000 cars a day, it's over the 2,000 car threshold for adding it today. It's an existing deficiency. And then the projection might be that it goes to 3,500 cars a day. So the increment that's proportion to new development is the 500 growth divided by the 3,500. That percentage is what's allocated. And it's done roadway by roadway or roadway segment by roadway segment where shoulders are being, and the 24% I was quoting is if you average it off all of them, but it can vary between each segment. And there is information in the Nexus study in the appendix that shows all those growth estimates that I can pull out and go over with.
And what's the horizon year on this again?
2050.
2050, okay.
Yeah.
So, so my overall reaction to kind of the application of, I would characterize this as a fairly standard way of doing business. This is how we've more or less calculated fees in the past. However, and being very intimately knowledgeable about development fees in a past professional capacity, what has changed and what is, looking through a fairly foggy crystal ball, but what we're hearing more and more about is fairly significant changes in transportation mode choice. The fact millennials, for instance, aren't buying cars like, Gen X's and baby boomers. The fact that we're going to have different ride-sharing capability, whether it be, ride-hailing apps or microtransit. Did any of that, that's kind of where we're kind of beginning to see a pretty significant shift in transportation behavior. Did any of that make its way into this analysis?
I could say to some extent because of what SACOG had done going into their 2016 Metropolitan Transportation SCS plan, that's the model we're using, is the one that starts with that. In fact, the growth assumptions and so forth start with that, and then we went beyond that to 2050. I know that in the new update of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan that there will be more of the things that you're talking about brought into that, but in the model that they have, that we're using, it is not as capable of forecasting those type of things.
Well, I think this speaks to Supervisor Natoli's concern, and I share the same concern, not just for rural roadways, but for this entire exercise, which is these are, fairly substantial increases in the fee amounts. And what we don't see here, quite frankly, that I would hope we would see at the time we're asked to approve any fee, is how these fees are stacked with other impact fees for the total fee load on a DUE, because that's going to be very important to this board member to understand how that's going to be influencing pricing, especially in an environment where we hear every day from our constituencies about the lack of affordable housing in particular. But if we understand that sensitivity today, and that, to that particular cost factor, that is impact fees, why wouldn't we deliberately go out and make some responsible assumptions about some of these, kind of less tangible influences on the need for lane mileage and capacity and getting from, LOSFs to something better? Because I think that's going to be the future, not necessarily the way we plan our transportation networks, the way we have for decades, because this is a fairly important shift that we're right, at the beginning of. And I think, quite frankly, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to prepare for the cost of expanding the transportation network to best serve the residents of Sacramento County, but at the same time maintain an equal sensitivity to the influence it's going to have on the price of housing. So, I'd like to see us somehow temper the work that's been done to date, so that by the time we get to a decision point, that somehow has made its way into the analysis, into the calculus here, and that spits out a fee. These are not incidental fees. I mean, combined with, habitat fees, depending on what growth area you're in, looking at all the other, array of impact fees, real quickly you're going to get up to, 6 digits. And then you got to figure out the construction cost per square foot, and pretty soon you're at a price point on your housing that it should be no wonder it's as expensive as it is. And then on top of that, of course, land price escalation.
Let me just clarify a couple things. I agree with what you're saying, but I guess the model that we're using, which is SACOG's model, does capture the smart growth aspects of land development. It has that capability, and that is not changing with what they're going through at the moment for their new update. What I was referring to is the issues related to the impact of autonomous vehicles, the different ride-sharing, things that are happening. That those are things that they're going to attempt to put into the next plan. But they're struggling with that too, because there's a wide difference of opinions on what that really means for the future, both in terms of forecasting it and for how long it takes for that to really get adopted into the system. So I don't know that we're going to see dramatic changes from that. I didn't want to lead you to believe that it's going to be a wholesale change. And I also wanted to clarify that we think that we're capturing the smart growth aspects of this plan.
And I appreciate that. But if SACOG's scheduled to kind of refine their assumption basis that would incorporate some of this travel behavior, these travel behavior inputs, in addition to the smart growth, the density, the TODs, and everything we know to be kind of smart growth when you're simultaneously looking at transportation and land use together, we will have passed our decision point on this. Correct me if I'm wrong. And are we expecting then to go back and refine it again? Probably not. So I guess what I'm saying is, why not try and take advantage of what we know today, in addition to the smart growth, aspects of what SACOG's doing?
Well, they're in the middle of doing that right now. I don't know that we'd have to wait some period of time before. Right. And I think that what they're doing is primarily doing what we call scenario testing. Mm-hmm. They aren't necessarily going to go out and say, this is our best prediction of this. They're going to say that here's various scenarios that could play out when it comes to these types of, new travel modes and technology. But so I don't know that that we'd be able to, at this point, make a significant change to what we forecasted thus far.
The last point here. So separate from what SACOG's doing, I would just encourage the team that's working on this to, in the time between today and our decision on this, do some research if you haven't done it on what maybe other jurisdictions are doing to begin to let what we know about emerging travel behavior trends affect these types of calculations, because I think it's again, I think we have an obligation to be to be as precise as we can. And I understand this is somewhat constrained legally because we have to show a connection between the impact and what we're doing about the impact. But at the same time, that we're going to, again, try and feed our treasury so that we can, build the transportation network that we all want. We also need to be looking at how do we keep housing costs as low as we can, too.
Ms. Frost?
I have a question relating to the map that you passed out. Am I getting ahead of your presentation? Because I can wait if I am.
Was it this one, or?
It's the map that talks about the new regional, not the new regional trails, the shoulders,
Oh, the roadway shoulders?
roadway shoulders.
Oh, okay.
Shoulder improvements on rural roads.
I can actually have that on here. I can skip ahead to find that one here.
I can wait until you get to
There we
it
are.
if you haven't gotten there. Why don't you just proceed, and then I'll ask when you get to it? Because
Okay.
you haven't gotten to
Well,
it. yet.
this was an extra one. It's not really in the presentation, so if you want to.
Why don't you ask
Talk
your
about it.
question?
Okay.
Yeah.
The question I have, I'm assuming there are certain triggers that must take place before these improvements will take place. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, the cost of the improvements that forms the basis for the fees would be carried by the fees that we adopt. So we probably wouldn't, for the thing that might trigger, say, shoulder improvements on a roadway would be a average daily traffic on it. So typically
A certain amount of traffic
Yeah,
will
so-
trigger roadway
and the number is
improvements.
2,000 vehicles a day, then over that amount you want to put on shoulders on the roadway. So that would be one particular thing that could
And
trigger such an.
do you have projections on triggers for all these different maps that you've provided? Are there projections from here to 2050 on when you anticipate it'll unfold?
Well, the analysis has determined that by 2050, that these particular roads, for instance, would need to have those improvements
Oh, okay.
installed on them.
Within that period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted.
Whether we have something more refined that gets you down to the exact year, I don't think we're down to that level of detail.
And this fee projection, these fees are based on right now, but every 5 years, we change this to be more accurate to what the
We
current
have to
market is.
review the fees every 5 years, and if we find that there have been changes in like we said for this one, we adopted a general plan update. We've had new specific plan areas come online, and construction costs have gone up, so there's been some very significant changes that would alter what the fees are based on. So we don't have to update it every 5 years, we just have to look at it. But if we continue if growth patterns change, if travel patterns change, we would likely be looking at updates, possibly on that 5-year time frame.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem at SACOG is no one quite knows how that's going to unfold, so I guess time will tell. Thank you.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, wait while you have that up there, Dan. I
Oh,
wanted
okay,
to catch you. That's why I punched up just real quickly. Connecting with my earlier point, if I look at this map, and with the exception Highway 104, which is a state highway east of Highway 99 once you get out of the city of Galt, which we're showing shoulders all the way to the Amador County line, and then you show Iowa-Michigan Bar Road there on the far eastern portion off of Highway 16. You've got Alta Mesa Road, for example, that runs through the heart of those rural communities, and yet we don't show, and I know there's some basis about, collector streets and so on, but you show no shoulder widenings there. That road, again, if you're going to do the nexus and start talking about doubling the fee in the rural areas, then it's not shown as being a 4-lane in the future, but you're talking about a rural roadway that I'm sure carries more than 2,000 cars a day. If I would go out there and explain this to my constituents, they say, well, you're going to build shoulders from the eastern end of City of Galt all the way to the Amador County line. You got very little population when you get east of Clay Station Road, and that's imperative. But it's not imperative to do Alta Mesa Road to the heart of eastern Galt and Harold and Wilton and Serving Slough House. Again, that's the type of if I was going to put money somewhere, it wouldn't be into putting it on Highway 104. State Highway can build their own shoulders. Yeah. It's going to put it into our local roadways. That, to me, if I'm going to offer an explanation to somebody, it's not going to be that I'm going to build it all the way to Amador County line, even 50 years from now. You need to do it in the community where people live, where there is some construction going on. You're not going to be building houses out in that part of the county. So I don't.
They do revise this every 5 years.
Yeah, I know.
It won't get 50.
I know, right. So again, just tell me the calculation. So how did you?
Well, there is what we're looking at here is actually table F1 in the Nexus study, but it lists the rural shoulder improvements that were analyzed, and we did look at Alta Mesa Road, and it, in its 2050 timeframe falls just short of 2,000 vehicles per day, so that's why it wasn't showing up here. It is one I think we would probably want to look at, considering including it in that, since we're like right on the threshold here.
And the state highway,
and any other ones like that.
Yeah, the state highway might carry 10,000 vehicles a day, but I don't see a lot of obligation. The state highway system, we might partner if we have an impact. But so again, as you're coming back in February, my point being is that I think that you use a model. It may be very valid, but if you're looking at the realities, and if you're going to go out there and justify 100% fee increase for new development in those areas, that ought to be more concise and more focused in on those areas that are actually going to have the people that are going to live there and travel those roads on a regular basis versus commuters coming up Highway 104 from Ione or wherever. So,
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Let's get back to your presentation.
Okay, we'll go back to the. So we've had some extensive discussion acknowledging that the fees have in fact gone up, and this is just another of the exhibits. This is a copy of Exhibit 4 that's attached to your package, and this is showing just how the individual land use fees in each district are changing from the existing to the proposed fee structure, and as we've discussed, the majority of the fees are going up, and but there are a few, in fact, that are going down. Those are the ones that are highlighted in blue, and that's really a factor of changes in the trip generation characteristics of these land uses. And I'll just kind of move on to the next slide, because this talks about the changes in the fees from the existing to the proposed, and what has brought about the cost increases and such. So there are new land use and growth estimates that are part of this, that are over and above what was in the existing program. This has resulted in, for the capacity improvements, and an increase in lane miles of needed capacity improvements of 20%. John talked about the more detailed, refined cost estimate process. In a lot of cases, that has resulted in some higher estimates. And then updated trip generation rates by land use. The trip generation rates that are used to determine the individual fee rates for specific land uses are based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. There has been at least one, possibly two updates to that manual since the existing fees were adopted, and that has actually resulted in some changes in trip generation characteristics for certain land uses. So, as would be depicted on this table, some of the land uses where the fees have actually gone down are like the industrial use and the warehouse use, because the type of trip generation that comes out of that isn't as high as it used to be, or on what the existing fee is based. And then one of the other, when we look at the differences between the existing and the proposed fee, in the proposed fees, these do not include fee caps that were adopted with the existing program. So when the program was adopted originally in 2008 and updated in 2010, certain fees, for example, the commercial fees, office, industrial, and warehouse were capped because it was just deemed to be too high. The fees that were based on actual nexus were considered by the board to just be too high, and caps were placed on those. Additionally, the annual adjustments, because we do annual adjustments to this fee program, which are based on the Caltrans Construction Cost Index, those are limited to 10%. So we can't increase the fees by more than 10% from year to year. And there have been a couple of years, particularly in recent times, where because of the escalation in construction costs, the actual costs increased more than 10%, but we had to hold them down because of the caps that are part of the fee program. And one more, this is a copy of part of Exhibit 6, and this provides a comparison of the proposed SCTDF fee rates with several other jurisdictions in the area. The jurisdictions we've selected here, Elk Grove, West Sac, Rancho Cordova, and El Dorado County, are put there because their fees in terms of the land use categories and the improvement types are most comparable to the SCTDF. Jurisdictions are pretty much free to determine what goes into their fee programs, or even how they condition development to pay for improvements. So we needed to find some that were comparable, so we were doing an apples to apples comparison. And so what this shows is that the proposed rates are kind of falling in line with the other jurisdictions. The one exception there is Elk Grove, which is showing a little lower. And the reason for that, the main reason for that, is because Elk Grove requires their developers to construct the outside traffic lane and curb, gutter, and sidewalk of their capacity improvements. Those are all included in the SCTDF, so there are some higher costs associated with those, and that's what, why the fees shown for Elk Grove are a little bit lower. Real quick on Special Finance District, this SCTDF update has been coordinated with existing and proposed special finance districts or public facility financing plans that fund transportation improvements in development plan areas. The impact fee programs that are included in these financing districts fund some of the improvements that are also funded in the SCTDF. So to address this overlap of improvements between the SCTDF and the plan area fee programs, and to prevent the double counting of fees or feeing a developer twice for the same improvement, the development that pays a fee in a financing district fee plan will likely be given a credit against their SCTDF fees. So whatever the overlap, in other words, where we have common facilities that are funded by both fee programs, we will reduce or provide a credit to the SCTDF that those fee payers and those finance districts would pay. The Nexus study itself doesn't address or doesn't include these credits. But when we come forward with the actual fee schedule in February, those plan areas that already have an existing fee program in place, the fee schedule will reflect that credit. So they will have a reduced fee than what would normally be applied to the district that they fall in. We've also been coordinating with the county special districts unit, as well as proponents from some of the plan areas that have existing or proposed fee programs, and we've been providing them with estimates of what this credit would be. So we've been able to give them an idea of how much of a credit against their plan or against their SCTDF would be available to them. This update process has included a significant amount of stakeholder outreach efforts. This includes 15 meetings with the local development community, and this has included general discussions about the update as well as focused discussions on specific development areas and specific issues. We also established a web page for the 2018 update that provides access to all of the draft documents that have gone into the process, as well as into the Nexus study, as well as information on the status of the update. We have also developed an email list of over 100 stakeholders that we're able to do email broadcasts when new documents are available or when there's been updates in the process. We've also received more than 130 written comments from stakeholders and have provided responses to all of these comments. And these are all contained in what's called attachment 2 to your agenda package. And then, and many of these comments have actually resulted in revisions to the Nexus study that's in front of you today. So just quickly on the next steps, again, we're getting your board's feedback as well as public feedback today. In January, we will be going to the RT board with the proposed transit impact fee to seek their approval, as well as approval of an MOU with the county. We will also be making a presentation to, excuse me, to the Capital Southeast Connector JPA Board of Directors in January. And then we plan to return to your board in early February with a request for the adoption of the 2018 update. And then any input we've received today, we will be reviewing that and addressing that in whatever we bring back. And then once approval of the fee program occurs and the approval of the ordinances occurs, that the fees would actually go into effect 60 days later. So that's it for the presentation, and we can answer more questions. We have, in addition to John and myself and Ron, we have
Thank you, Dan.
staff
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I did raise the question with you in briefing yesterday as we look in just looking at Figure 3, the roadway improvements draft program. And I know that you said we'd take a look at it. I just wanted, for the record, put it out there that we don't have any contemplation, and it's yet to be decided by our board about, as we look at Mather South and discussions about how we might get across the Folsom South Canal between Douglas and Kiefer, as to contemplating that in this program. And again, not knowing what the board may do when we actually hear that next year, I think it'll be important to have some consideration for that. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask about, though, was as we're shopping this to get comments and so forth, have we briefed the Community Planning Advisory Councils on this? Has information been transmitted to them? Not that necessarily you'd be making the circuit to go to all the council meetings, but this is important for a lot of different reasons, looking forward. And so have we done that, or do we intend to do that? And if not, I guess I would suggest that we at least provide a briefing packet for chairpersons of the councils, and then they can determine if they want to have staff come out.
Yeah, that has not been done, but we can go ahead and do that, at least to get information out to the
right,
council
and
members.
if they would like to have discussion. I know you're trying to get back to this, in late winter to this board, and I get it. You've been working on it for a long time, but I think it's important for folks to know what's being contemplated. Thanks.
Mr. Cerna?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Dan. I know a lot of work's gone into this, and I think you're hearing from some of us the interest in some refinement, further refinement. What, if anything, is going on that simultaneous that might have some influence or not as it relates to the Metro Air Park finance plan and the effort to bring that up to date?
Well, we are, or this process is coordinating with that in terms of defining overlapping improvements and then what their associated credit against the SCTDF. So we have developed those numbers and have been providing that to the stakeholders there. Now, I know they are going through a process of updating their finance plan and even looking at revising some of the facilities up there that from what currently is proposed, and certain types of roadway configurations and such. So when that's accomplished, then we'll have to look at, does any of that affect what roadways we've included or what projects we've included in the SCTDF? At the very least, it would affect the overlap. So if some of the improvements continue to be common to the plan area, then we would, but there's revisions in really what their fee structure is and all that, then we would deal with that overlap with that update.
So are we expecting to have the update of the finance plan completed before this is finalized?
They're not on the schedule to be before us, no. There are the North Vineyard Station financing plan update is on a very similar schedule, so we may be very close with that one. And we have, again, been coordinating with them on addressing the overlap of improvements and the associated credit against the SCTDF.
So if something like, I don't know, a particular interchange crossing I-5 is to be contemplated for initiation of construction in the spring construction season of 19. What if any effect will the timing of the completion of this fee update and the finance plan for Metro Air Park have? In other words, there's nothing relative to both efforts being in process now that would keep us from potentially getting that project kick-started in as early as March, right? Assuming we can find
this
funding.
process wouldn't affect that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing might be the relationship of the SCTDF to how the plan area is financing that, because that's really what, so far the intent is that the financing plan, or the plan area is actually going to cover all of the cost of that. There may be, as a result of that, once they've adopted an actual fee, an overlap with the SCTDF that would result in lower SCTDF rates for those developers.
So even if a creative reimbursement agreement were to be in play to help get that started sooner rather than later, the ultimate fee could be applied in the context of a reimbursement agreement between landowners without any problem.
Right. And it kind of depends on the timing of when the improvements are constructed and how they finance it. Whether we can provide a credit against the fees that they might be obligated to pay, or reimbursement from the fee revenues in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you. On your outreach, you said you held 15 meetings and responded to 130 written comments. Are there any comments unresponded to? Have you responded to everyone and to everyone's satisfaction?
I believe we have. We have provided a response Their satisfaction, I'm not sure, but we have at least provided a response.
Ron Vicari, Director of Transportation. We have responded to all the questions we've received. I think there's a couple maybe that have come in the last week. We've got a commitment to continue to respond to any additional questions that will come up, and we immediately put the questions and answers up on the web page so that anybody can view what our answer is to it. We have been able we've received some valuable questions and have been able to make some modifications to the current program as a result of some great questions. There's been some that we've explained why we are not willing to address them. So as far as to the satisfaction of everyone, I think that we've been able to show why, if we have not been able to make the changes that have been requested, why that is.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a map in the additional section on your presentation entitled Future Roadway Deficiencies with SCTDF Roadway Improvements. Explain that to me. Page 18.
All right. Basically, what that depicts is there are, I think I mentioned earlier, there's some 78 miles of roadways that we've determined, even with their full build-out and construction of all the capacity improvements in the SCTDF, building them out to their full general plan configuration. When we get to by the time we get to year 2050, these roadways will continue to have deficiencies. In other words, they will operate at level of
So these are
service
level of service
F.
deficiencies?
Yeah. So they'll operate at level of service F or worse.
Thank you.
That's what.
Any other questions from board members? I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Does anyone here wish to speak to this item? Okay. Well, this is more or less a receive and file in the way we've heard from you, and you got feedback and direction, so
Okay.
thank you. Go on to
Thank
our
you.
next item.
Item 63 is the 2018 zoning code amendments, round 2, cleanup amendments related to Chapter 3, Chapter 5, and 7.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Leanne Moffett, your planning director, here to give the staff presentation on this item. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I am going to run through this with a verbal presentation. This is one of your routine regular packages, round 2 for 2018, of relatively minor amendments to the zoning code. This package contains 8 items. I'm going to run through 7 of those fairly quickly, and then I'm going to pause and stop and talk about one, which has to do with fencing. So starting with the first 7, the first of those has to do with outdoor display, storage, and comfort features. This had come up as a question from a board member during a prior hearing, and so we did go through and refine our standards for each of these 3, separating them out. So first, with regard to merchandise display, that will not be allowed in the industrial zones, but will be allowed by right in the buildable areas of commercial zones for items that are normally used outside, and they can be outdoors during business hours. They can also be considered in the setback areas with a minor use permit. Regarding outdoor storage, that will be allowed in commercial and industrial zones with specified criteria in the amendment, including screening. And then with regard to comfort features, such as bike racks or benches, there's a lot more flexibility for those types of features now in the zoning code, so that they can be in the setback areas. We have a new definition, refined definition for small accessory structures. Staff was having a hard time given the lack of definition, so this clarifies that the size is a maximum 120 square feet and 9 feet in height to be a small accessory structure. In the past, you have contemplated staff recommended changes to the habitable area and had adopted an urgency ordinance around that, and this brings those provisions into the zoning code on a permanent basis. The next 3 items are all items that had been in prior code versions that were inadvertently omitted. The first has to do with food production wholesale bakeries. In the current code, they're allowed in heavy industrial and general commercial, but they were not allowed in light industrial, which makes no sense. So we're adding that back in as a permitted use. We had accidentally omitted the trash enclosure setbacks in multifamily zones, so we're bringing those back. And then we had accidentally omitted permitting mobile homes in the RD1, RD2, RD3, and RD4 zones. So we addressed it in some zones, but a couple of them we sort of missed. And then finally, as part of looking at the next item on fencing, we also looked at the organization of the development standards and definitions, and we have some recommended improvements to the organization and the definition, particularly in versus open fencing and solid fencing. There's a range of in between, and so we define that a little bit better. And then the final 8th item has to do with fencing height restrictions for single-family and duplex properties. And this was part of a prior zoning code package. You had some concerns that were expressed, so it was dropped out, and we've brought that back with essentially the same staff recommendation that we had before. The older code allowed side yard fences of up to 6 feet to be built all the way to the back of walk. And that was a concern. It was causing visibility problems. So when we did the 2015 update, we restricted those fences, taller fences, going all the way to the back of walk. When we did that code amendment, we phrased it in terms of the front yard. And what staff really intended it to be, we believe, is the front yard setback, because there is a difference between the front yard and the front yard setback. The front yard is when you measure all the way to where the house is built. The front yard setback is the minimum setback, which is typically 20 feet. So you could have a homeowner who simply chooses to build their home at the back of their lot. And we didn't necessarily intend to say that they then can't have a fence down their side yard that it has to go all the way back because they simply chose to build their house further back. So this code amendment would instead say that the setback is the front yard setback. And then it also clarifies what happens on cul-de-sac lots, because we do have different measurements on cul-de-sac lots. So in a cul-de-sac, we would use the same methodology that we use to define what the setback of the house is. So the staff recommendation is to limit the height of fences so that solid fences would be at 3 feet, chain link or similar would be at 4 feet, and open ornamental could be up to 7 feet at those setback distances. We have a neighbor who spoke at your prior board hearing and has followed this item, and we do expect testimony today, who has a cul-de-sac lot that does not meet the typical lot width standards. Presumably, this particular lots on this cul-de-sac were probably created with an exception to lot width. So it is a not an unheard of example. I did look on aerials, and I will say, looking around, I cruised around Orangevale and Carmichael and Fair Oaks on the aerial, and it does look like most cul-de-sacs. We have successfully gotten the properties to meet the 65-foot width, but every now and again you'll see lots like these where they have a very narrow, relatively narrow opening onto their lot. And in this case, the resident wants the neighbor's fence to be lowered in height as far back as possible. And so the prior language that has it go back to the house would meet the intent of her desires for where the fence should be on her neighbor's property. However, from the staff perspective, we feel that this has a negative implication for how we would apply the zoning code on a county-wide basis. And I have 2 aerials I was going to put on the overhead here to show you 2 different situations. So the first here is a just random single-family property. I don't actually know the street. It's not relevant to where it is, but we just found a situation where we had a series of homes where the homeowners had chosen to build their homes well behind the 20-foot setback line. So this line right here, they could bring the homes up to this 20-foot line, but in this case, they have chosen, these are relatively larger lots, they have chosen to push the homes back on the lots. So with the term front yard, that would mean none of the side yard fences could be built higher than either 3 feet or 4 feet until you hit the front of the house. And it would be staff's recommendation instead that you allow that side yard fencing to come out to the 20-foot setback. You know, you could have a house on the next lot where it is at the 20 feet. And then you have to sort of figure out, you know, the fence lines jagging in or out. So that's one circumstance.
Could you pause there for a second?
Absolutely.
Mrs. Serna?
Thank you. Front of the house or front of the structure?
I think it would, well,
What happens if you have a bit of a snout garage?
garage. I think it would probably be the front of the structure.
Okay.
We would consider that all
Okay.
one structure, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this other situation here is where we've had testimony from the prior property owner, where we have a cul-de-sac where each of these lots do not have the typical standard 65-foot width. So normally on a wider lot, you know, this would be 65 feet and your house would be facing sort of at an angle to the cul-de-sac. But in this case, this neighbor has a relatively narrow opening and then the house is back here, facing here. And this neighbor initially had built a fence all the way out to the edge here. And then this code amendment will help define how far back they can pull their fence. This lot is also substandard in its lot width frontage. So the way we measure the house setback, even though this house actually happens to be existing non-conforming because it's built up, but the way we measure it now is we go back to where there's a 65-foot width, and that would be where you could build the fence. So essentially, with the zoning code as recommended by staff, they could have a taller fence up to this point, and then they would need to step it down to no more than 3 feet for this portion of the lot. This property owner, previously the fence was back here, or at the very least would be to here, and they would prefer...
I'd lost that.
Sure. Under the definition of front yard, the fence would have to be parallel with the front of the garage, so it would have to be pulled back to like this line right here. And this property owner would prefer not to have the fencing. The property owner in this home would prefer not to have the fencing in this area because they believe that it blocks their view out the window here. The problem for staff is that
Where is
sort
the
of,
front of each house?
well, this is the front of this house. I guess essentially this is probably the front of this house
Well, where's the entrance?
here,
Okay,
which faces this other lot.
okay.
Where's the line for the other house setback?
Well, if this house right here,
No, the other house.
oh, it would be 50 feet. We don't push it back. Typically, you measure until you hit a 65-foot width, but in no case do you ever go back more than 50 feet. So it would be 50 feet would be back here somewhere. We didn't put that line on the map.
Okay, we've got,
Have it further back.
They would, but typically, a lot of times you go in with good neighbor fences, so in this case, on this lot, it would be here. Or this neighbor at least could build their fence out to here.
Mr. Natoli?
Quickly, so there's a mirrored situation. I don't know about the fence, but just one house over. If I look at the map we received, yeah, if you went to, yeah,
Here.
if you continue to run over,
There's another over here, yes. This
Right.
type of cul-de-sac, yes, exists on this side.
What do those fences look like?
yeah,
I don't know if they have fences over there, I don't know.
Mr. Kirkland can probably tell us, but I just was curious. But as I said to you in the briefing, the thing that kind of strikes me beyond obviously the concern about, view shed or visibility to the street and so forth is that the setback is actually deeper because the way you calculate this for, the party that's here to would express the concerns than it is for the one who has, the house closer to the street and such, and I don't know, it looks like they got additional parking in there and so forth. So if Ms. Kirkland was the one that wanted to build the fence and it was, reverse shoes here, but she couldn't put her fence as far as they put their fence, and yet they have this adjoining, you basically got side yard, front yard, which again, just thinking about it a little more since we talked, maybe that's where you could parse this in the code, that where side yard meets front yard, that there's some sort of a standard approach that wouldn't get us into a situation that we have right here, that, you know, it kind of strikes a compromise, but, you know, taking the fence all the way out to the street, or 7 foot to that green line, I guess what you're saying, that's what you would allow for?
The staff proposal is to go to the green line,
Right.
yes.
And right now, the fence is all the way out to the street?
The old code would have allowed it to go out to the street. The fence was built after the 2015 code update happened, and so it was a zoning code violation. And so it didn't precede the 2015.
Oh, so it's been removed back to that line where you're green?
It has been removed back to the green line, and we're sort of, code enforcement is awaiting the outcome of this process to determine what to do with the fence.
So the neighbor on the left wants the fence at the green line, and the neighbor on the right wants the fence to go back to where it's parallel with the lot lines.
Yes.
So we're only talking about that section of fence.
Yes, we're talking about this section of fence.
Okay, Mr. Cerna?
Yeah, similar line of questioning. So I just want to make sure I understand the white line, the property line, when it jogs over, that's as high as 7 feet?
Yes, this component in the staff proposal, it could be 7 feet up to this green line.
And then it can drop down to 3 to
Drop down to minimum, 3.
That 7 foot part in particular seems very odd, given that really is the front of that house, right?
It is a challenge when you have these lots, and when I was looking around, every now and again, you'll see one where there's essentially almost like a private drive. It's almost like a flag lot.
Sure.
Where this is even thinner.
Right.
And it goes back to the house, and the house is just basically, you know, a flag lot behind another house. That is not what planners typically like to see, and
No, I understand.
it usually takes an exception to create that kind of lot, and we discourage it. But
Right.
in cruising around on the aerials, every now and again, you will find one of those.
So I guess my question is, why wouldn't you have the same standard apply here, where the 7 foot good neighbor fence runs with the terminus of the structure? So it wouldn't even make the turn there. You see what I'm saying? So,
Right.
and then
well,
then you can run 3 feet from there to the curb if you wanted.
I mean, we're trying to come up with a standard that also works on a normal cul-de-sac, where the houses are all laid out. So if you had a different situation where you had a larger cul-de-sac where these are all wider and the houses were back, then you'd be precluding any fencing in the typical front yard setback on that cul-de-sac. We're trying to write a standard that applies to all different kinds of situations. Admittedly, I don't have 10 different aerials of 10 different circumstances of how this
Sometimes,
would play out, but yeah.
trying to come up with one size fits all can be sometimes fuel. But
Yeah.
this to me, from a practical standpoint, it'd be helpful if we were able to tilt this into a axiometric, view, so you can actually see a little bit of the elevation. Because to me, it would look really odd to have a 7 foot fence essentially blocking part of the front of the house on the left.
Right, well, essentially, this is the front door, so this is the front of the house.
No, I
There-
understand. I'm talking
yeah.
about the other house, though.
This house right here?
Yeah.
Right, they've chosen to install the front fence for privacy.
But
in
it's
this
odd
case.
from the standpoint of the kind of the street frontage too, to have, those good neighbor 7 foot fences actually turn corners and begin to come into elevation view from a street front is odd. That's all I'm saying.
Right. The problem for us is if they happen to build the house back here, that would basically say you couldn't have any fences out in the front.
Okay, Ms. Frost?
It seems like you're applying a different standard to the house on the right. On the house on the left, you're applying a standard based on the setback and the width of the structure, or a minimum width of the structure, and yet it doesn't even get back to the structure on the other house. So how does that,
Sure.
how do you rationalize that both were treated fairly? I'm trying to get I guess, to the,
Sure. So from the planning perspective, if they wanted to, they would have to meet a 5-foot side yard setback, but they could fill this area in with a building. This green line represents the building setback. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to us to allow them to build the house out to here. Admittedly, they would have to have a 5-foot side yard setback. They couldn't put it right to this line and not build a fence. I mean, if you can build a structure there, why wouldn't you be able to build a fence?
and equally, the person on the right could build up to that setback if you kept the circle going.
Well, their line is actually a little bit further back because their lot is narrower.
So there's a width and a setback requirement.
Yes, the setback requirement is dependent on the width.
Is this all something that was in the prelim? Is this a notification when someone buys a home? Or is this part of
I don't know.
what they know?
I
mean,
actually don't know. I don't know how long ago these lots were created or what was disclosed.
Okay, one of the individuals is here to speak, so if there aren't any more questions on this, we'll let her speak and we can come back to this particular issue. I don't have any questions on any of the rest of the update. That's
Thank you.
okay with you? Okay, Monica Kirkland. Flo, could you help with the height?
Do I
there?
have 3 minutes? 2 minutes? I'm going to use 1 minute to, my name is Monica Kirkland. I live at 6508 Addington Court, the house on the right. I would like to use 1 minute of my time with this fictional scenario. Mary Jane was driving on a particularly curved street of Jasper in the town of Pokemon. She was exceeding the 25-mile speed limit considerably and was unable to navigate a curve, took out a treasured sampling, a sampling that Luigi was able to legally import from his grandfather's home in Carrara, Italy. It was planted very near the street, adjacent to his driveway. There were no sidewalks. The city officials had no way to determine Mary Jane's speed, but they felt that they needed to rectify future problems by posting the 25-mile sign more prominently and placing an arterial stop on the preceding intersection. This done, they felt that the future tree placement should not be so near the street and issued a new code setting a 12-foot setback for future planning. Luigi wished to replace the tree, but given the curved lot he occupied, his home entrance was a mere 16 foot from the street near his driveway. Could he replace this tree? A rather simplistic story, but does it actually kind of talk about the rule of law? At the Planning Commission meeting, one of the commissioners asked me what I wanted. I did not know how to respond. I do now. I wish the fence constructed to follow the codes at the time it was constructed. I've given you a plot map showing the lot and setback guidelines for the 2 lots in question. I secured these on May 7th, 2018 at the Planning Department. The one for 6508 does not include the 65 setback shown in Table 5.7 of Residential Development Standards and what was originally provided by the builder. It only shows a 50-foot setback, which was not even considered in the compromise solution put forth today on the agenda, which considers only the home at 6512. I have 3 points. I was told the code would be enforced for 3.5 months while the building continued. It was not. I wish it enforced. My property was entitled and given a 65-foot frontage when built and when I purchased it. It does not now. I wish it restored. Setbacks primarily measure from the front lot line to the entrances of the home. Discussion of fences basically indicate barriers in front of homes to secure privacy, protect areas, hide automobiles, or trash receptacles. This fence does none of this. It is a division of 2 front yards with privacy for one from another and barricading the second from the vision of the street, neighbors, and safety of street illumination. I tried to send a rationale in the wee hours of this morning, but I do not believe you would have had time to access it. The 3 pages following the maps are the same. Please note the compromise on page 3. I do not accept this as a compromise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask, in the addendum that the homeowner's given us, she says there's a section called compromise. Have you laid that out with your, can you show us what that is on your map or your photograph there?
I'll put the graphic over here.
Okay.
And I believe it is essentially what I was saying, which is moving the fence back to the plane of the home to the left.
That's not correct.
Okay. Yeah. Or perhaps it's the setback, it's using this setback rather than this property a setback, which is further back. Using the more restrictive of the two setbacks for when you have two lots with different setbacks on a cul-de-sac.
Okay, Ms. Frost?
You did state that even if you restricted it, that they, according to the building code, they could extend their structure beyond the fence requirement.
Yes.
So
This homeowner
technically,
could build a house.
if they couldn't have a fence and they really wanted a wall, they could just build a wall.
Yes. they
So
could
you
build a
wouldn't solve the problem.
home. Yes. You could block the view with a much taller structure, as presumably a house would be a lot taller than a 7-foot fence.
We've been here before, and I guess you've given this considerable thought, and this is the best solution that you can think of. I can't think of anything else. Can anyone else?
If I could, just to respond to that.
Kelly?
Yeah, but, and then I don't know that it corrects the current, but it seems to me, again, going way back when, we created the lots. We have all these setbacks. We don't know exactly how they're going to calculate. But, and it may not help Ms. Kirkland and the situation at Addington Court, but, you know, as we look at density bumps and folks trying to get more lots into cul-de-sacs and such over time, you know, I can see, you know, I understand kind of the perspective of how you presented these lots, but if I were Ms. Kirkland's, you know, situation, I probably would be displeased too, recognizing kind of what was historically there, and then, but because the code allows for, somebody obviously can take advantage of that to the extent that they can do it legally. And initially, I guess we're going to build all the way out to the street, which that in itself is. But I guess, you know, looking forward, it doesn't correct the current. There must be a way to get to this. Otherwise, we're just going to leave this on the code. You know, it's going to leave some future board potentially or supervisor of a district in a very similar dilemma. It would seem nothing else. We could avoid this in the future and make it clear on lots such as that. You know, you put a fence line, and people that move in there the first time, and from there on out, they know where that fence as far as it can go, and it doesn't go to pushing your house out or anything else. Because again, I think we encourage visibility on streets from the standpoint of public safety, on neighborhood watch, and all that. And then we stuff two houses by virtue of the way the lots are created by giving them 15-foot frontage, which is hardly enough to get the driveway in there. And then they sit back in there, and the homeowners didn't do that. We, the county, approved that. Somewhere along the line, we were allowed for it anyway, and approved it with building permits. And so I think we need to offer some correction beyond just this interpretation, because I can see it occurring again with these arcs, the way they're driven. You know, and so if you get a situation where you get this in the future, it needs to be red flagged. That's my view.
I think you've already tried to talk to the neighbors, right? We've already been down that path. Is that correct?
Yes,
We've tried to reason with the neighbors and see if there was a compromise, a different kind of fence.
Yeah, and the neighbor on the left wanted to use the standards that were in effect prior to 2015, which is to build a tall fence all the way out to the back of the lot. And that was historically what was allowed. And I'm sure we have that situation out there where there are side yard fences that go all the way to the back of walk. But staff was trying to, in 2015, rectify that by forcing the side yard fences at that height to be back further. It's just how far back do we go, and how do we phrase that?
Well, we've come further. So, I mean, we've improved what it was considerably, I think, right?
Absolutely,
It
yes.
seems.
Yes.
Well, we've made progress. I am not sure I know any other solution at this point beyond what we're doing, since even if we were to make an adjustment to the fencing requirement, they could still build a structure. It doesn't fix the problem. It seems like we've come as far as we can go. Am I wrong? I think we've come as far as we can go as far as what's going to address this issue.
That is the staff recommendation, yes.
So I think at this point, maybe trying to find a way to come to some kind of an understanding with your neighbor, or some kind of a compromise on a property owner to property owner level might be a way to move forward. I don't know if we can fix this problem here at this time. And I feel bad because you're in a situation where your property is set back and it doesn't face the street, and it's a little bit of a different situation. And there seems to be some issue there between the two neighbors and this fence. So I'm going to go ahead and support staff's recommendation. And I feel bad for Ms. Kirkland, because I know this is a difficult situation. I think it's better than it was. We've improved it a little bit by bringing the fence back and lowering it, but maybe...
12 feet, that is nothing.
Well,
That's what it is, 12 feet.
I think in order for, we've been here before several months ago, and we can continue to try to figure out ways that we can get around it, but no one can seem to tell me how to change the building code requirement. They have a right to build their house out to that edge. So requiring a fence in a different location than what you can build your house doesn't seem doable. So I think at this time I'm going to go ahead and support staff's recommendation, and if my office can help you in working with your neighbor to maybe see if we can help you. I don't know if we can. I don't know how we can help you with that relationship with your neighbor, but it seems like if there might be a way to work out with your neighbor something personally that where you could compromise with a good neighbor, how can we work this out type thing. If we can help you with that, I hope you will reach out to us, and we'll do everything we can to help potentiate those conversations. And in the meantime, I think right now I'm going to go ahead and support this staff's recommendation on this. I also, with the zoning code, Leanne, there was one other situation in Rio Linda where the folks out there in Rio Linda have a farmer's market where they meet, and they meet weekly or periodically, I think more than 10 times a year, and so they're required to get a permit, and when trying to get a temporary use permit, they're having some issues because they go out there more than that 10-time requirement. It's not something they do as a for-profit business. It's not a formal business. It's something where all the neighbors come out and they sell what they grew in their yard, and it's just a place where they can sell their wares and then it's a good community gathering and an opportunity for local neighbors to sell what they grew. And they're trying to figure out how they can get a temporary use permit, and it's a struggle. I know we've talked about this from my office, and I wonder if there's something you can do for the next zoning code amendment to see if there's something we can do with the SPA in Rio Linda, or some way that we can work with them so that they can continue doing this without having to pay thousands of dollars for permit fees.
Yes,
Good.
thank you for raising that. I think it is good to bring up items that you would like us to look at in the next package, and planning staff would be happy to look at the definition of farmers market in the Rio Linda SPA, which is not permitted right now, and we can evaluate that and put that in the next package and return through the process to your board with that.
Okay, and then Monica, if you want to reach out to me, I'll be happy. We'll happy to work with you on that.
Thank you. I have a question about the sign program. We've been talking for some time about revising the sign program for commercial retail purposes, and I've yet to see anything. Any predictions?
No, thank you again for raising items of interest. That one has proven to be fairly complex and has been a very slow-going one, but with your expression of interest, we'll get back to working on a schedule and a timeline that we can bring that forward to the board. It is something that needs to get done.
Okay, so that means within 6 months.
Okay.
I think she nodded. Okay. So I need a motion to approve the zoning code amendments, round 2. I'll second it. Please vote.
Unanimous vote. Item 64 is the Castleman South project. This is a Vineyard Community Plan Amendment, Florin Vineyard Community Plan Amendment, rezone, tentative subdivision map, and design review for properties located at 8680, 8698, and 8710 Castleman Road in the Vineyard community. The environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration.
Good afternoon, members of your board. You last heard this item on November 7th, at which time you approved the associated general plan amendment. I am actually going to skip the PowerPoint because it is substantially the same PowerPoint as I gave back on November 7th, and refer you to the staff recommendations. This is a 90-lot map in the Vineyard area, and page 1 and 2 of your board report, if there are no questions, do have the staff recommendations for approval of the remainder, including the amendments to this community plan, and there are 2 community plan amendment components, and the rezone and the subdivision map and design review.
Okay, any questions?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Please vote.
Unanimous vote. Item 65 is the North Vineyard Plaza project, a request for North Vineyard Station specific plan amendment, rezone, tentative parcel map, and a use permit and design review for a property located at the northeast corner of the Bradshaw Road, Gerber Road intersection in the Vineyard community, and the environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program.
All right, thank you very much. I am going to be giving you a PowerPoint on this one. There were several questions that arose when you heard the initial presentation back on November 7th. And so I do have a PowerPoint to give with a few visuals to report back on those 3 items. Thank you very much. So this property is 7.73 acres in the Vineyard community at the northeast corner of Bradshaw and Gerber. On November 7th, the board approved the general plan amendment and certified the CEQA documents. And there were several pending requests listed on the slide here: specific plan amendment, rezone, parcel map, use permit, and design review. And there were 3 questions that arose and discussion points that arose during the hearing. The timing of required fences and walls, the waiver to the development standards, or to the logical segment requirement, of the specific plan and conditions relative to the alcohol requirements. So first, just to stop and point out the parcel map here, starting with the map, the graphic that's on the right-hand side of this slide, the proposal is to divide this up into 6 parcels, and they're listed there along with their parcel sizes. The north of the property line is a drainage area. And so with regard to fencing on that north boundary line, there is a requirement that it be open fencing for visibility so that we don't have surveillance problems or homeless problems along the drainage way. So ultimately, we'll be working with Southgate Park and Rec to have open fencing along that drainage way. The plan by the developer is to build the chevron on parcel 1, and the graphic on the left shows how that chevron will lay out on the site with a drive serving the other parcels and the chevron sort of behind the chevron. And then we have looked at the fencing on the east side and do have some new proposed condition that would trigger the construction of a masonry wall on the east side with the build out of either parcels 3 or parcel 6, which are closest to that eastern boundary, or were there to be a change to the parcel map or a boundary line adjustment or something, any non-residential development within 100 feet of that eastern property boundary. And so that is new map condition 98 and rezone condition number 7 at the top of this slide. We have also in your board report a discussion on the logical segment, the request for a waiver to the logical segment requirement, and the recommendation of the Department of Transportation relative to this item is to approve that requested waiver from the logical segment standard. Transportation is already working on potential modifications to the requirements in the North Vineyard Station specific plan, and they would be returning to the board for potential revisions to that, but that is going to take some months. And so in the meanwhile, they are continuing to recommend that this particular project be approved, that waiver, which is in condition number 29. And then finally, with regard to cross-referencing items related to the sale of alcohol, we have revised condition number 3 to do that. And then there were 2 other more routine revisions to conditions, map number 72, and we've corrected the design review exhibits that are noted on this slide. So those were sort of the 3 items. Any questions on those?
Mr. Natoli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leanne, thanks for your work on the condition as it relates to the interface with the ag residential. And I think that the condition that you've brought forward and having talked it over with you and understanding what we're going to be doing to the northern portion of the lot, I think that's satisfactory. Either that lot 3 or 6 or some reconfiguration of those 2 would trigger that. If we could, though, you gave the overview for transportation. I'd like to have somebody from transportation, Mr. Darrow, somebody come forward. I wanted to ask about that. Hi, Matt. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Briefly, again, I know you folks reviewed this. You continue to recommend for this, and as Leanne summarized, you're going to be back to us. It doesn't really say when. It just says months or later date. It seems to me that as it relates to this application and how folks who may have similar and or not so similar, but nonetheless have logical segment requirements to potentially trigger that is holding back probably residential development, but there might be other commercial locations where they're considering that maybe midstream and not at a corner. I think there's somewhat of an imperative to get back to this board. This isn't a new issue. I know you internally have looked at it in transportation, talking with infrastructure finance and maybe others, but it's really a policy matter that I think needs to be before this board, because there are those, again, who you're familiar with because you respond to these questions, but who might very well approach this board and or are being held in abeyance because they just can't, not unlike what this applicant makes the claim of, it would kill their project if they had to, build a half mile each direction in this case. So could you give me some idea when you think it's going to be back to the board? Recognize you don't control all of that, but I think it's important to...
Sure. And basically, I just want to acknowledge basically what Leanne said, nailed it. I got a couple more details. But basically, we got together in November when this first came to the board. We heard that we wanted to have that discussion and a report back. We pulled folks from special districts, transportation, planning, county council together and started talking. And it quickly became apparent that we need more time to flesh a lot of this stuff out, as I'm sure you understand. The goal is to come back springtime in 2019. Hope to get things wrapped up by then and have something that we can come together and talk about and flesh those things out before we just start talking about them at the podium.
Okay.
But some of the things that we started kicking around and we want to kind of take them to get all the details down is the possibility of breaking down the logical segments to a quarter mile from the half mile that they are now, which tends to be onerous for development. The possibility of changing some of the language in the conditions that exist and right now say that the first person that touches the logical segment shall construct it. Want to remove the first person part. And thoughts on creative ways maybe we'd be able to finance when exceptions do occur if we can get money into the plan so that future logical segments can be funded, and even the possibility of possibly Department of Transportation taking some of these logical segments on and providing them when it makes sense. So some of the things that we kicked around to those, but it's going to take us a few months to kind of come back and present something logical. So I would say spring.
Okay. So with that, does this application before us, because obviously you're recommending it and they will build along their frontage, which is not insignificant, but is there any dilemma that they don't construct the logical segment, so the next one in line, whoever it might be, again, in the same general vicinity, is going to, and I don't know if there's anything pending, but they're going to be before us or before you, before they get to us, saying, well, how come?
I think that, since this particular project, I think the answer to the first question is that we don't see this as creating a logical segment issue in and of itself, a sawtooth issue in and of itself. In fact, this is a project that's going to phase itself, so its next logical adjacent development will be itself. So we hope to get those things they probably hope to get them as soon as they can get them too, by developing. And hopefully by the time, anybody is coming in next, we'll have some of this stuff solved, is my thought.
Okay, to be clear then, so the corner development includes the proposed Chevron station, but as a part of that development, they'll build all the way to the bridge?
They will ultimately build all the way to the bridge.
No, I don't mean ultimately. Right now, they trigger that. The parcel will build, that was my understanding, that by doing this with this rezone, that they don't build beyond the boundaries of their property, but I thought that they had to build all the improvements, and if I'm mistaken, then I was thinking that they're not just going to build their corners, they're going to build, that property's in common ownership, that they had to build their property only. Is that not what we're doing?
What a logical segment asks them to do is go a half mile. Half mile is not the bridge. I understand what you're saying. We can ask.
Well, I said the bridge, but they build to their property boundaries. This current 7-acre site, with the first building permit out, they build to the limits on the east and on the north of their property. Is that correct?
My understanding is they would propose to phase it, but if we want to talk about that, I guess that we
Well, I
could
didn't
require
understand.
that.
I thought that was a justification. Now that's different than I understood. Maybe I asked the question differently, but I thought that they were going to build that lot, built the improvements, and that was what they're calling it good. They don't get logical segment. They basically, that was the point. It was going to break the project if they went beyond that. I didn't understand that now we're going to have multiple phases, so we could have a bite on the north and then another bite, and then to the east you got 2 intervening parcels that you're going to have 3 segmented pieces of a frontage improvement. That's different than because when we talked about it, and Mr. Wiley's standing up, but the last time was how we transitioned to the east and not putting the wall in, so I thought they were going to build all those frontage improvements at one time.
I think that they're proposing phasing.
That to me is a logical piece of it. They're avoiding building half-mile segments, but that they were going to build because now what we're going to have is potentially 4 or 5 different property owners, and 3 or 4 of them who will touch either Bradshaw or Gerber, and so we see then we do have a sawtooth. You got the corner with the Chevron station going to their driveway, and then you're going to wait for somebody to develop to the north on this existing piece of property, and you're going to wait for one, maybe two parcels on the south against Gerber that we'll have to build before those improvements get fully in, just on the property that's before. So we did a general plan amendment, we did a rezone, we got a PCN that we're looking at. Those are significant entitlements for this property, and it seems to me, again, correct me for my misunderstanding, but I thought that was the argument. We got to build it, get this large frontage on both ends. We got to build it, and now, we don't want to go beyond that. So, sure, Jim. Yeah, because again, my understanding was you were going to build the whole parcel up.
So the first phase would do its frontage.
Jim, could you introduce yourself?
Jim Wiley with Taylor and Wiley on behalf of the applicant. And do you need me to be sworn in for this? Okay.
Affirm.
I do.
And then please just state that you have been sworn.
I have been sworn.
Thank you.
The plan is that the first phase would be with the gas stations going to where the where the driveways are. The next phase would have to do the rest of the property. So it's not, whatever parcel goes next has to complete the rest of it.
On both the western frontage and on the southern frontage as well?
I believe that's how it's written. It's both frontages. We have the condition is number 36.
So I guess why
Because
does
a gas station, it's one small operator and it can't cover the cost of doing the whole thing, let alone a mile worth of improvements.
Well, you weren't going to do them. No, I know.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
I'm going to the bigger picture.
Yeah, no,
what the requirement
I'm
is.
past that. I get
Yeah,
it. So
okay.
I thought, and that's why I thought, okay, we're going to do the corner because even my conversation yesterday with Matt, and when I talked with you a few days, I was talking about the transition at the barricade at the east. What we're going to do, we're just going to put a barricade, not thinking that the east was just the eastern edge of the driveway on the Chevron property. Because you have common ownership. The owner, I trust.
It is the same owner.
Yeah, and
It's just a financial component. There's significant fees as well, and with the operation of a gas station, you can't cover those
Yeah.
costs.
well, I guess, was that clear to you? Because, Matt, is that what you understand? Because it was not clear to me. I thought they were going to build it out, and that's what we
I apologize
yeah.
if that's the
No, I know. But I thought the give was we weren't
Yeah.
making it build it out, a mile worth of road, but you were going to do the lot in the
Yeah.
frontage. So because again, Bradshaw is a major quarter, so now you're going to have a gap between the station and the bridge where there are improvements that the county installed with the Bradshaw widening, and then you're going to have this other gap, and so how is it you're going to condition the next property if you part and parcel that?
So that whatever next parcel in the subdivision that develops is responsible for putting in the rest of the frontage. It just helps defer the cost.
I know. So, but if I'm north of the Chevron station, I buy that parcel, whatever that number is. I can't see it here, but so
Parcel 2 would then be responsible for both.
And that's as big an obligation as there is to this one.
But it makes it more palatable doing it that way than all up front. It won't work.
Well, okay, but again, so you're going to say somebody has frontage on Bradshaw Road that won't even touch Gerber.
They get common access off of Gerber through the curved road that will be put in with the gas station. They all have reciprocal access.
Okay, you answered my question.
Doesn't like the answer.
Yeah, you got that. This is not what I understood, so.
Number 36.
Number 36, I have the,
Cerna?
Thank you.
Is this for Mr. Wiley or for Mr. Darrow?
It's probably for Leanne, actually.
Oh, Leanne.
Throw you a curveball. I know that there's a lot of rigorous analysis on corner projects like this when it comes to this particular use for on-site large truck turning movements for fuel deliveries. This is kind of a unique layout here because you have these, it looks like dedicated single lanes coming off of Bradshaw that are a little bit circuitous, kind of come around the Subway store. So just explain as fast as you can how a large, either single large tanker or double tanker is supposed to navigate around the fuel island and is not going to block traffic, and it just looks very congested.
Back up. I think this graphic is probably
Yeah.
better.
Are they expected, let's start, are they expected to come off Gerber and back onto Gerber?
Well, I think when they go onto the site from this circular drive, and then they do need to navigate internal to the site, and then they could go back either out on either Gerber or out on Bradshaw from that
Can you,
external driveway.
can you point it out?
Let's see. All right. Oh. If I could have the overhead instead. So this, staff did analyze the ability for the trucks to turn around. So here's this external circular driveway, so they could come in here, and then were able to prove that they had enough radius to get the truck in and out.
Really?
That's what this analysis was about, was that it's a large enough site to be able to.
So even but I don't assume with that tanker up in the far right corner, you're telling me that length of tanker, which I don't know that length of tanker is actually legal in California, but it just looks like it's too large. But you're telling me that you come in from Bradshaw, you come down that single lane that runs kind of parallel to the car wash lane, but going the other direction.
Yes.
And then you make that hard right and be able to swing a double tanker hard enough you're not going to interrupt incoming traffic from Gerber.
Yeah, so this is a truck turning template, Supervisor Cerna, that shows that this size vehicle would be going north on Bradshaw, be able to make the turns as shown and track through the site and exit back north on Bradshaw. So that's what this is showing.
And all it would take is, for whatever reason, some stacking of regular vehicles that are attempting to get out of parking, get into parking to interrupt that free flow, and you'd kind of have a mess on your hands, right? Wouldn't take much.
Like anywhere, but yeah.
But it's, I mean, it just looks really tight to me, but.
Yeah, it does look really tight, but they're showing that it would work. And I can't tell you when their hours of fuel delivery are. I don't know if they're during non-peak hours, I would expect.
Okay.
Are you back up again, Mr.
Yeah,
Anselli? Yeah,
just-
thank you, okay.
Sorry. Could you put that parcel map back up, the picture of the parcel map, if you didn't have it?
Certainly. On the upper right here.
Okay, now I've had a chance to review condition 36. It's, as described, is that if I take access off of Bradshaw Road, so parcel 2 is responsible for its improvements, that condition reads, and then those that take access off of Gerber Road, 3 and 6, will construct at the time those lots. It's not, Jim, you just said that it was going to be at the time, the next one in does it all. That's not the case. You could have 4 different iterations of this, if I read that correctly. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. To me, it needs to be done. Thanks. Thanks. That's all I have.
Any other questions? I mean, that's how condition 36 reads. If you would like something else, I think we would need to, that's the staff recommendation, we would need to step back and probably continue the item to rewrite that if we do have the will of the board wanting to change it. I don't
Well, let me
think
offer,
we could-
Mr. Wiley, maybe that was your understanding, maybe that wasn't what you were representing, that if you said that the next parcel in does the rest, it's going to be different than condition 36 reads. So if that means you only have 2 bites at this thing versus 4 bites to get it all done on that property. So if they're willing to, I'm willing to entertain that, Because then you do the chevron with the corner and curb returns, and then I don't care if it's 2, 3, 6, or 4, they get it. You know, it gets in there. So they need to figure out their development plan versus otherwise it is incremental and it's sawtooth along that frontage. You just, you know, potentially, unless it all develops at one time, and they're going to sell the parcels off. That's the, you know, those properties are already listed at the sign. It says retail lots are available, pending this board's action, I'm sure. So if they're agreeable to do that, then you can restructure 36, and you get it in a logical corner bite, and then you get the rest of the frontages along there.
All right. I think we're waiting to hear from the
Okay.
applicant.
Hey, do you want a 5-minute recess or something? How long?
Yes.
Is that,
5 minutes.
Mr. Wiley, would 5 minutes be enough for a recess?
5 minutes would be great.
Okay, we'll recess 5 minutes. Call the meeting of Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, December 11th, 2018, back to order. Please take the roll.
Cerna?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Okay. So do you need to read the item again?
Why don't I just go ahead and do that since,
66?
yeah. Well, actually, we're on 65.
Oh, 5. Yeah, sorry.
This is the North Vineyard Plaza project, a request for a North Vineyard Station specific plan amendment, rezone, tentative parcel map, use permit, and a design review for a property located at the northeast corner of the Bradshaw Road, Gerber Road intersection in the Vineyard community. The environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program.
All right, thank you for that opportunity for a break. I think we do have an agreement to revise condition number 36. However, I think that is going to take us, I don't necessarily want to rewrite that here in the room. And so my recommendation would be to continue this item into January so that we can come back with clear revised materials, including a clear condition.
Could you do it by tomorrow? Again, I'm not looking to hold anybody up here. Could you bring it back? We're in session tomorrow, so if you could bring it back to us. Is that possible?
Yeah, I got yeses up there. I don't know, the planning of the,
Just
I
that
mean, we
one
probably-
condition.
Yeah, we probably can.
Just that
Does it
condition,
fit
yeah.
tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
All right.
We can do that.
okay, so then you would like to continue this hearing until tomorrow at, we're just going to say 2,
Yeah, let's
even
just
though
say
you'll be
2 o'clock.
last? Okay. Is it a motion, Mr. Natoli?
Right. And so we continue this item and the next item, need to couple them together, or can we hear the other item without that?
Yeah, my preference is that the board doesn't take action on the alcohol license until you have a project that you have approved.
I'll get 2 for
Good idea.
So we could continue both of them if you're willing to do
Okay.
that.
Okay, so
All right.
So why don't I read item 66, since you're going to continue both of these items, which is the North Vineyard Plaza Chevron PCN. It's the ABC license hearing to determine whether public convenience would be served by issuance of a Type 20 liquor license to Maya Chevron, located at 9743 Gerber Road in the Vineyard community.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, who?
The applicant.
I would just, Jim Wiley again. Before we continued, I just want to make sure there's no other issues that we need to resolve that we could be doing before tomorrow.
We'll
I
let you
think
know
we've
tomorrow.
covered everything.
No.
I don't see any.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Not promising, but seems all right at the moment.
Okay. All right, I would move we continue items 65 and 66 till tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and with the revised condition coming back on the improvement.
Second.
Please vote.
May I make,
Just very quickly. I just want to make sure Leanne has enough time because we do have a session Monday at 9:30 in the morning.
We can do it tomorrow. This is just one condition. You got to be able to.
Well, we have, it's a pretty busy agenda tomorrow, unless they want to go at the, they're going to be last after
Yeah, we
the,
will be fairly late tomorrow.
and I do have one correction. We start your hearing items at 3 p.m., not 2 tomorrow.
Yes, 3 p.m. tomorrow, and then Monday we have a session at 9:30. I just want to make sure we have enough staff to bring a complete product back to you, or staff has.
Yeah.
I'm at your discretion whenever you choose to.
We've had a hearing. I mean, you certainly, with this condition, if it, as understood, if we.
The PCN will take 10 minutes probably to
Yeah, I
go,
don't have a
10,
problem with
15
PCN,
minutes. So
it's
if tomorrow is very crowded, then
The reason I bring that up is we have the Cosmon report, which is going to take
Yeah.
some time, and then we have 2 homeless items, which are updates, which I don't think are going to be brief. Those are going to be, we want to make a full presentation on that. So if it's the board's pleasure, if we could bring them back Monday, it would be the first thing we do before we get to ICE hearing. Flo, can we do
okay,
that?
so we're
Yeah,
going to change the date on this.
To 12/17 at 9:30.
Does that work for you, Mr. Wiley? You can be here?
That works.
Oh, sorry, yes.
All right.
Thank you. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Good catch.
Any nominations?
Yes, so now we're at item 67 for your nominations. You are continuing to January the 15th, Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Advisory Board, continuing to February 5th, the County Service Area 4B, Slough House, Wilton, Consumnes, County Service Area 4C, Delta Citizens Municipal Advisory Council, the Natomas Community Planning Advisory Council, South Sacramento Area Community Planning Advisory Council, and the Southeast Area Community Planning Advisory Council. And for your matters today, we have the Adult and Aging Commission.
Chiefs recommend Thomas Johnson to the general public seat.
Carmichael Old Foothill Farms Community Planning Advisory Council.
Please continue to January 15th.
Cemetery Advisory Commission.
Please continue to January 15th.
And please continue to January 15th.
Mr. Natoli.
Continue to January 15th.
And Mr. Cerna.
January 15th.
Okay, Children's Coalition.
Chiefs recommend Sudhir Padanchara to the education seat, and the remainder to be continued to February 5th.
Consumnes Area Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Frost.
Please reappoint John Merchant.
And Mr. Natoli.
Continue to February 5th, 2019.
Mission Oaks Recreation and Park District.
Please continue to January 15th.
North Highlands Foothill Farms Community Planning Advisory Council.
Please continue to January 15th.
Paratransit.
Continue to January 29th.
Sacramento County Youth Commission, Supervisor Kennedy.
January 15th, please.
And Supervisor Peters.
Please nominate Anna Flush as our nominee and request the process to be waived.
Second.
Please vote.
Unanimous vote. And then we have the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Commission. Mr. Kennedy.
Continue to January 15th.
And then Vineyard Area Community Planning Advisory Council, Mr. Kennedy.
Continue to January 15th.
Mr. Natoli.
Nominate Jofiel Borgia.
Okay, and that concludes your nominations.
Okay, county executive comments?
No comments.
Okay. Supervisors, Mr. Cerna?
Thank you. Real quickly, I just want to make mention of the fact we received some very good news yesterday, and those of us that also serve on the Regional Transit Board of Directors heard about it from the general manager last night, but I wanted to share with this board that the staff of the California Growth Council is recommending a $23 million grant be granted for the TCC. This is the Transformative Climate Communities part of the Twin Rivers redevelopment project, which is, I know my colleagues will remember, is actually a county asset, even though it's in the city of Sacramento. And large part of that $23 million grant, we're hopeful that certainly that the council will approve it in the coming weeks. But a good portion of that would be used to help fund a new light rail station across the street on 12th Street. So very good news. I know there are a number of us that an elective office that have overlapping districts there that flanked Lachelle Dozier, her skilled staff, and putting our best foot forward. So that's great news that we're on the radar of the council, and hopefully in the new year I'll be able to report that they actually approved the grant. But this is good news.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Additional comments? I have an adjournment. Last month, Carmichael Community lost a dedicated community member with the passing of Karen Borman, who served on the Carmichael Recreation and Park District's Advisory Board until her illness forced her resignation. She'd been an engaged member of the Park District's Advisory Board throughout most of 2018, having first been appointed 10 years ago in 2008. Professionally, she was a teacher and elementary school principal for 28 years with the San Juan Unified School District before her retirement. Since she joined the Carmichael Kiwanis in 1977, she was fully committed to Kiwanis, taking on a number of leadership positions, including treasurer, president, and lieutenant governor for the Kiwanis district, comprised of California, Nevada, and Hawaii. Karen had a major role in the Park District's success that has resulted in the development of 3 new parks over a 4-year period that had been abandoned vacant lots for many years. Under her leadership, Patriots Park, Jan Park, Heritage Oak Parks were created, and most recently, while on the advisory board, Karen was involved with the renovation improvements made at Sutter Park, linking it to the Jensen Botanical Gardens. It's fitting that our board adjourn today in the memory of Karen Borman, and Carmichael will pay its respects to Karen this coming Sunday, December 16th, at the La Sierra Community Center. If there's no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned.